You're listening to the Inside Syracuse Basketball podcast presented by Kraus Health, the exclusive healthcare partner of Syracuse Athletics.
Well, welcome back to another edition of the Inside Syracuse Basketball podcast. And this edition of the podcast is going to be an interesting one, folks. It's sparked by last week's release of the ACC's 2024-25 season schedule, or not all the dates, but the opponents the teams will be playing next season. And to talk about the schedule and answer a few questions I had, I reached out to an old friend, Paul Brazeau, the Senior Associate Commissioner of the ACC. Paul, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Morning, Mike. How you doing? Great to see you. Great to be with you here today. I like that we're talking about this because that kind of presumes that both of us will still be here next year when we play basketball. So that's great.
Well, I'm not planning to leave the conference anytime soon. I haven't filed any lawsuits to get out of my contract at the Post-Standard or syracuse.com. I don't know what your plans are.
Mine are to keep working as long as everybody will keep having me.
Before I really get into the nitty gritty, I was wondering just what goes into putting a schedule together. I mean, because I know now next season there's going to be 18 teams, but even in like the last 10 years when you've had 15 teams in a conference, what goes into putting it together? Is this just strictly like you put in the names of the teams and you put it in a computer program and it spits something out to you? Or how much of a human element is involved in putting a schedule together?
Sure. Well, there's the math part of it first, Mike. When it's based on the number of teams you have, the number of games you're going to play, and the number of play dates that are available. And by play date, what I mean is we build our schedule based on Saturday and Wednesday. And you have to kind of really work backwards from the Final Four to when your conference tournament will be, and then work backwards on the number of Saturday, Wednesday, all the way back so that you have the mathematical number that is possible to make a full schedule. In our current 15 teams, 120 games, 150 games, if you do the math on it, you can play 7 games in one play date because we have 15 teams, but you can play 7 and then someone has to have a bye. So it's 7. Now you back that out. Okay, 7 on Saturday, work backwards, and we can fill 147 games, 7 times the 20. So there's 147. So we have these 3 other games that we, right now in this current model, that you have to place at a different play date that's not when everyone else is playing. So we have 3 games a year that we call them rover games. We try to set them on a date well in advance for our schools that were going to be in the rover games. They know the year they were going to be in it, and we set a date for them that is outside of the block where everyone else plays. So those fans that have paid attention to that would notice there are 3 games that are in different spot in the calendar each year. Going forward, that goes away because we're going to have 18 teams. We'll have an even number. We're going to be able to play 9 games per play date. But the same process, we work backwards from the Final Four for the number of play dates that you'll have. We'll need 22 this year going forward, and then in the next version, 22 play dates. So that's usually that could be 11 Saturdays and 11 weekdays. It doesn't always work that way because Christmas may fall on a Saturday or Christmas fall on a Wednesday, and then we don't want to play then. We're careful about playing. We get this different dynamic this year with the CFP expanding, and they're going to take up some different Saturdays. We may be able to work around it. We may not. But we don't want to create a situation where one of our football teams is hosting and they were supposed to be hosting a basketball game too. So there's a lot that'll go into this, but so that's the math part of it.
All right.
Then on the other side of it, we add into it some requests that people might have. We, as a conference, Duke Carolina is a special game. We always try to play that on the last Saturday. So we're setting that. We take a look at what games are most attractive for the Big Monday package, because that's important to the conference. The Big Monday, and I think it's important to our teams, important to the conference. So we look at some things there that we have to try to then, that becomes part of the big puzzle later when you put the games on days, and you got to lock a few puzzle pieces. If you lock a few puzzle pieces, you can't change them later, and you still got to make for a nice picture. So that becomes the challenge later on. So those are the things that we do ahead of time. This year, the math works differently, Mike. 18 teams, 20 games. There's not an automatic that someone has to have a bye. We are going to create buys. Teams will have 2 buys. We'll use 22 play dates. And the reason we have to have buys is because, I'll get to it. So let me back up just a second. Your 20 games are made up this way. Your 2 partners, which have been your 2 partners that you currently have. So in Syracuse's instance, it's Pittsburgh and Boston College.
Right.
So they will play Pittsburgh and Boston College home and home every year going forward. Syracuse will play one of the remaining 15 home and home, and that'll rotate through everybody for 15 years. For example, you'd have to refresh me. I can't, off the top of my head, don't know who Syracuse's repeat opponent is next year.
Notre Dame.
Okay, so they'll repeat with Notre Dame next year, and then it goes through for 15 years. So it'll be, sometime Carolina, sometime Duke, sometime Virginia, sometime SMU, all Stanford, Cal, all the way through until it cycles through 15 years.
Okay.
So and then you play the remaining 14, 7 at home and 7 away. Mm-hmm. So that's your 20 games, and that's how it built. So
you were mentioning a bye. You're going to keep buys.
Right. We got to keep buys because when you play, when Stanford and Cal play each other, okay, there is not another one of our teams out in the Bay Area that they would play the next game. So because we're going to try them when you go to the Bay Area to play in pairs. And we're able to do that in nearly all cases through the 15 years. There's a couple of nuanced years that you might only have a Stanford or a Cal. Somebody would only have Stanford or Cal that year on the road. But we would couple that maybe with coming back on the way back. They play SMU or they play Notre Dame or something like that. Those are only a few times over the 15 years. So the buys, creating the buys helps us to let you play your partner without another game being involved in it. So one of the partners gets the matchup. So that's why it has to be a buy. There actually will be 2 buys because of the math again. But it'll feel a lot like the current season, the current model that people have just been through.
When Jim Phillips came to you with news that they were adding 3 new schools, and you probably already had schedules made for years out, what was your reaction? How mad were you?
Well, I wasn't mad if it was to help the conference, obviously.
You didn't go to him and say, you know what, you could have done High Point, Elon, and Wofford, and and not like West Coast schools, right?
No one really asked me, Mike, on whether I was for expansion or not. But anyway, so in our current this year, so 15 team league, with the 20 conference games, the cycle rotated every 3rd year. It was a 3-year rotation. It was nice and clean, 3-year rotation. Great. We are in the 2nd year of the 2nd time through. This current season was the 2nd time of the 2nd time through. So again, that was all that part. The opponent part was all laid out. The opponent part beginning next year, what we attempted to do first, and we were fortunate, it was able to happen, is the people you play only away this year. So Syracuse had 4 opponents that played only at one time at. We wanted to try, first of all, to see if we could, that in next year, 7 away onlys, the singles, 7 away only, that you would not go back to a place you went this year. So for instance, if Syracuse played only, and I'm not sure, again, if they played only at Georgia Tech, I'm making this up, they wouldn't go just to Georgia Tech as away next year. We wanted to flip them all as best we could. Well, luckily,
you did.
Fortunately, we were able to do that. Yeah, we were able to do that. So that was one of our starting points, how to not make people go. So you didn't have Georgia Tech only on the road 2 years in a row, that it became home, away. And we were able to do that, fortunately. Probably some good luck in there. But so we were able to do that. Then you work backwards from that. That led to the single repeat opponent, to that pattern. And then, so, computers help, this whole thing, but we were able to put it together. And again, it's over 15 years. It's 100% balanced over 15 years. Whether or not we'll get all 15 years in, we'll see down the road. But but it is set up and ready to go. But there could be changes. I mean, we didn't want to release 15 years. It was just, we wanted to be able to say, all right, let's go through this first year. Let's see if there's any unforeseen hiccups that we didn't anticipate. Let's see how, should we ever go to divisional play? We don't know. There's just there's things out there that you can speculate on and think about. But so we have the 20 game schedule for 15 years, the opponent rotation done. We released the 1 year. The harder part now, Mike, will be putting those actual games onto dates on the calendars. I've asked our schools, we building availability.
Right.
Building availability. Stanford and Cal, for instance, and it would apply to everybody else. We couldn't have Syracuse go out to Stanford and Cal say, well, we don't have our building that weekend because there is a concert. I don't know, making this up, or graduation even. There could be. So yeah. All those pieces now have to come into place. That's going to be a real challenge, putting the games on the particular days on the calendar.
Yeah, every school has something going on with their buildings at some point. I've pointed out in recent years, Syracuse, over the last 5 years, when you've had the early December conference games, Syracuse has been away every single time. Because
football, high school football, right?
High school football, exactly, yeah. Right. And I don't want to see the high schools kicked out of the dome. I think it's great. I've covered those games. But Syracuse will open the season usually on the road, or at least they have the last 5 years. I want to ask you a question I hear a lot from fans, alumni, particularly down in the Carolinas. This past year, Syracuse played all 4 Carolina schools. Now, next year, they're not going to play any of them on the road. No game at Wake, Carolina State, or Duke. And it means the alumni in that area don't get a chance to see their team, in person at all. And, I was wondering, is that something that you're able to take into consideration with all the other moving parts you have going on? Or is that just one of those things like, listen, if it happens in the schedule because you've got all these other things you have to satisfy first?
Sure. So you sort of answered it. With all the moving parts, some nuances cannot be corrected. But over the 15 years, if you had the whole thing, you'd see there will be, because it gets affected by your repeat opponent. It gets, and as things get flipped up during subsequent years, the fact that your permanent opponent, your partners, Boston College and in Pittsburgh, so all the pieces influence each other. They truly do. And it's a thing you try to solve. You can't solve them all. But we've said to our team, we try to get you 90% of what you hope for. And if we can get, 90, if you get 100, we'd never get 100. Perfection is the goal. We can't ever reach it. But you try to get them as much as possible. and the flip side for Syracuse is when you get North Carolina and Duke at home in the same year, it's a heck of a revenue opportunity for John Wildhack and the department, because you get 2 games, and if you're also fortunate that they land on Saturdays, that's likely even better in terms of just revenue to the department.
The other thing, I was looking at the new schedule for next season. Syracuse will play at each of the 3 new members: Southern Methodist down in Dallas, Cal, and Stanford. But none of the 3 new schools come to the Dome. And as far as I know, I think Syracuse is the only ACC school that isn't hosting at least one of the 3 new schools. Is that just like another quirk of putting the whole thing together, or something you really don't even worry about?
Yeah, I'm not sure that's necessarily the case, but it's one of those we had to treat. I think Virginia is the same. They have the 3 of them on the road. We had to treat SMU for like an existing member, like one of the current group in terms of geography.
Geography, okay.
Yeah. So and at the end of the day, if Syracuse flies to Miami or flies to SMU, it's fairly similar. It might be the same exact time. I don't even know. But so we had to treat SMU in that vein, so that when you went, or Currents went to the West Coast, you would play 2 games out there on the trip. So we got to think of SMU as a Current, and then that's how it revolves.
SMU.
Maybe you get them in football. Do you get SMU in football? Do you get anybody in football?
I don't cover football, so I do pay attention to it, but I got to be honest, I don't have the schedule memorized.
Yeah, I don't know either. So I had an acquaintance who told me he was all excited because he's from Dallas, and Duke's playing SMU in Dallas, and then SMU football is playing at Duke. So he was excited that they got both.
That's cool. Yep. Looking at the Duke and Carolina, the 2 flagship programs, I think in the ACC, I think we can all agree on that still. I don't think Carolina plays on the road at any of the 3 new schools next season, and Duke only has a road game at SMU. Wouldn't it have been a little bit of sense to welcome the new members in by sending one of the flagship programs out as like a, I don't know, welcoming party?
Well, they would say, why don't we welcome at our building? Because we're only going to play them once. So we should welcome them here. As SMU and Cal have never been in the Smith Center or Cameron, likely, and so it works well. Yeah, somebody had to start on the road. Somebody had to start at home.
And that gets reversed in year 2.
Reverse in year 2, yes.
So,
yep. And then the cadence basically is every other year. It's that pattern. The math of it is, because we play a 20 game schedule and there's 18, the math of it is it's a little more than every other year, because it's 9 times in 16 years. But that's, you don't need to get, it's a little more every other year, Mike. Now the women's schedule, the women only play 18 games. So in that case, they really are every other year.
I thought it was interesting. You released the women's schedules for the next 2 years, as opposed to only releasing next year for the men. Why'd you release 2 for the women?
Well, the women's was equally balanced because of the 18 games. So they could go boom, boom. You can see it's just going to flip. There wasn't really, there's no, Matt, they don't have the repeat partner, the additional 2 games that we have. They have one. They have one. Yeah, they have one partner that they repeat with. Everybody else is thing. So for theirs, it was just a flip. But ours, we do what we really want to evaluate at the end of the year, or at some point in time. All right, what are the costs? What are the travel difficulties maybe that you have? If you go to play Cal and Stanford, I'm just speculating here. You're in a Wednesday, Saturday. You're on a Wednesday, Saturday. You got to go Tuesday probably. You do. You got to go Tuesday. And now you're Tuesday night, Wednesday night, Thursday night, Friday night of hotel. expenses there. Play the game Saturday. Do you come back Saturday night, or do you stay and come back Sunday so that to try to get your travel, your jet lag piece squared away? So there's a lot of things I think our teams want to look at first. Will there be a possibility of Thursday and Saturday games out in the West Coast? Now, there's a possibility, but the Stanford or Cal women would also have to be away because they were playing on their schedule is kind of a Thursday, Sunday schedule. So there's a lot of things that we said, let's go with one season because we may want to make tweaks.
Gotcha.
Maybe we don't have to, but it's ready if we don't have to. If we have to make tweaks, we've got time. And that way we didn't give out information that changed again, that kind of thing.
Okay. How much do you hear from coaches? How much actual input do the coaches have?
In the whole process of scheduling? We talk about 20 games. We talk about variations on conference games. We've got some contractual fulfillments we have to have with our television partners. Our coaches, they want to play two when they go to the Bay Area.
Okay.
They don't want to go two separate trips. So that's going to constrict some things. But most of our coaches, vast majority, and I say coaches, and this has been over my 10 years here, so there's been different coaches. You got 10 at home and 10 on the road, and we got to play the game that's in front of you. So they're really good about that. Now, listen, no one wants that. We wouldn't want Cal, for instance, to come here and play one game at Miami and the next game at Syracuse. That's too hard. The middle leg of that trip is unreasonable. But when they come and play Miami, their next game might be Georgia Tech, Florida State, Clemson. That's a reasonable middle leg.
Sure.
And we'll try to do that. So that when we do those things, again, every time, if you think of this 180 games, there's 360 pieces to a puzzle. And every time you lock a puzzle piece in somehow, somewhere, again, the other 359 have to fit. And you got to make them fit. That's the challenge of the schedule. And that's when I got 3 in a row on the road. Fans more than the coaches. I hear that. Oh, our team's got to play 3 in a row. Yeah, sometimes we do because we got to make it fair all the way through. So we kind of are happy when all 18 schools are equally unfair. Because everybody, the other 17 will all have a better schedule than me. That's just how it's going to be.
Is there any talk of scaling back to an 18-game conference schedule, or is 20 the sweet spot? Not
sure. I mean, that's another thing that can be looked at, but there's trade-offs. There's trade-offs. If you play 18 games, you got to go find 2 more games. And they're not just, they don't grow in your backyard. You can just go find 2 more games that, are attractive to your fans and attractive to you in terms of competing for national championship and making the NCAA tournament, so on and so forth. So there's challenges to going finding 2 more games as well, where in the conference, if you say we're going to play 20, you don't have to look for the opponent. You've got a home game coming, you've got a road game coming. You're not looking for the opponent.
One question I was going to ask in terms of plotting out the schedules years, in advance was to give schools some advance notice on what their schedule might look like so that they can make determinations on their non-conference schedules, particularly if you want to play in a multi-team event like the Battle for Atlantis or the Maui Invitation. Like if you're Syracuse and you got 2 road games at Stanford and Cal in a given year, maybe that's not the year to also schedule the Maui Invitational. That's going to be a lot of travel. Is that an advantage? Does that one reason why you've got this whole thing plotted out for the next 15 years?
It's exactly why. So that teams know, Syracuse knows the years it's going to the Bay Area. So we can evaluate. We're going to the Bay Area, then maybe a game. Let's take a game like the Oregon game they played this year in South Dakota. Maybe you say, all right, we're going to play that kind of a game, whatever your preference is, the years we have Cal and Stanford and Syracuse, or the year we're going there. You get to make that determination individually as a university and as a program. So I know I'm in Cal and Stanford in 27. I'm making this up now. So I adjust my schedule around that.
Does the possibility of schools leaving the conference impact your ability or desire to plan that far ahead?
No, it didn't. It actually, to plan the 15, made it a perfectly balanced schedule. If we have to redo it again sometime for whatever reason, we get additions, we'll do that. But it was the most prudent thing was to build the 15 years so it's perfectly balanced. People would know when you're going to the West Coast and when they're coming to your place. Like I said, the harder part, Mike, truly will be putting those actual games on those calendar dates.
And the calendar dates, that's kind of like my last question here. How much attention do you pay to trying to equalize two things? Saturday home games for teams, because every team, including Syracuse, wants Saturday games. I think your attendance goes up. And the other factor is games played on your campus when your students aren't there. I mean, like, it's one thing to have a couple of home games. It's great. But when your students aren't there, you kind of lose that home court advantage. So do you really pay attention to little things like, like that? Like, when classes resume in January?
For sure. Let me give you another nuance in here. So next year, there are 154 available days between the start of the season and the conference tournaments, the last Saturday that we would play. It was 154. Some years there's only 147.
That's a whole week.
It's a week. And that impacts our ability to lay out play dates. So there's a week. In our current situation, we have 10 home games, 10 away games. Our goal for your home is to play 5 and 5. 5 midweek, 5 Saturday. That's for everybody. We're trying for that. Math won't let it happen because you might have more Saturdays one year than you have weekdays, or vice versa. So 4 and 6 or 6 and 4 is acceptable. And the next year you try to reverse it. So you're trying to get the same number of weeknights as weekends, home, away. And you got 9 o'clock starts that we throw in here, like everybody's favorite, the 9 o'clock start.
I think I heard Tony Bennett complaining about that a week ago.
It's just, that's where we are. So you got all these little things. Now, no one's asking you, the coaches aren't saying, the program's saying, well, let's take less money and not play all those 9 o'clock games. We won't put them on TV, and take less money. No one's saying that. Just so we're clear. Now, with the 9 o'clocks, we try to spread those evenly as best we can across everybody. So everybody has the excitement of a 9 o'clock game on their campus. Everyone gets to have some 9 o'clocks and feel that excitement. So we try to spread those evenly.
Gotcha. Well, this has been real informative, Paul. I appreciate you coming on and just kind of talking us through all the schedule, because, I'll be the first to admit, when a schedule comes out, I go through it and I look for a complaint. I like to do that. But I try to do it knowing that there is logic behind most of the things that seem illogical.
It is without a doubt. Like I said, we try to make it equally unfair for everybody. And we're not sitting there just throwing darts on the wall and saying, hey, let's see what sticks. It may not be great, the brain part of it, but there's a methodology behind it that you're trying to solve. And again, take everything in mind: travel, days of the week, consecutive road games, consecutive home games. I mean, you try to, as best you can, make it fair. I mean, we're trying to make it fair for everybody.
Sounds good. just like Rodney Dangerfield and Caddyshack. Hey, keep it fair.
Keep it fair. There you go.
Join us next time for the Inside Syracuse Basketball podcast presented by Crouse Health, the exclusive healthcare partner for Syracuse Athletics.